May 25, 1955. Kangchenjunga, 8,586 meters above sea level. Joe Brown does something no climber is supposed to do. He stops, not because he is exhausted, not because the route ends. The weather is clear. His body is still moving. The summit is right there, a few feet of snow between him and the highest point of the world's third tallest mountain. He stops because he made a promise. And in one of the most extraordinary moments in the entire history of mountaineering, he keeps it. Kangchenjunga sits on the border of Nepal and India and rises to 8,586 meters, the third highest point on Earth. But this mountain has never really been about height. For the people of Sikkim and surrounding Himalayan communities, Kangchenjunga is sacred ground. Its name translates to the 5 treasures of the Great Snow. Local traditions describe powerful guardian deities living on the mountain, with the absolute highest point serving as their home. Not a summit, a threshold. Stepping onto that final patch of snow was seen as crossing a boundary humans were never meant to cross. That belief had been held for generations before any climber arrived with ropes and oxygen tanks and ambitions about standing on top of the world. And when the climbers did arrive, a handful of them listened. But before anyone could make a promise about the summit, they had to survive long enough to reach it. And for 50 years, the mountain made that nearly impossible. Kangchenjunga's reputation before 1955 was built on failure and death. Its glaciers shifted without warning. Icefalls blocked every viable route. Avalanche zones covered the most direct lines. Violent Himalayan storms could arrive without forecast and erase weeks of progress in hours. The first serious attempt came in 1905. A team linked to British occultist Aleister Crowley attempted the southwest face via the Yalung Glacier. An avalanche swept through the expedition between Camps 6 and 7, killing Swiss climber Alexis Pache and 3 porters. The survivors abandoned the attempt and descended. Attempt after attempt followed over the next 5 decades. None reached the top. Then came Charles Evans. His British expedition arrived in 1955 with better equipment, better planning, and better judgment than any previous team. But before the first crampon touched the mountain, Evans met with the people of Sikkim and listened. The request they made was specific. If his team reached the summit, they were to halt just short of the absolute highest point. The final few feet belonged to the mountain's guardian spirits. Evans agreed without argument. No law required it. No authority would have known if his team ignored it. The agreement was built entirely on trust between a British expedition and communities who had considered this mountain holy for longer than mountaineering had existed as a sport. They thought they were making one promise. They were actually creating a tradition. Joe Brown and George Band, May 25, 1955. Joe Brown was 24 years old and already considered one of Britain's finest technical climbers when he set out for the summit with George Band on May 25, 1955. The route above their highest camp had been earned the hard way. Avalanches had crashed through camp so frequently during the expedition that Band had once counted dozens in a single day. Unstable ice falls and hidden crevasses had turned short distances into full days of dangerous work. Every camp had been pushed higher across the Yalung face through weeks of sustained effort. Now only the summit ridge remained. Near the top, a steep rock wall blocked the route. Brown took the lead and forced his way through what became recognized as the highest rock pitch ever climbed at that time. The band followed close behind. Then the summit cone appeared, a short stretch of snow leading to the highest point of the world's third tallest mountain. For a moment, history stood within reach. Brown and Band halted. Band recalled later that they had come as far as they were allowed. They stood just below the absolute highest point and turned around. Not because they couldn't continue, because they had said they wouldn't. Norman Hardy and Tony Strether, May 26, 1955. The following morning, Norman Hardy and Tony Strether followed as the expedition's second summit team. Near the top, they discovered a slightly easier line around the final rock barrier. The path to the true summit was clearer than it had been for Brown and Band. Nobody was watching. Nobody would have known. They refused the final step as well. In 2 days, what had begun as one expedition's private agreement had become something else entirely, a standard. A statement about what kind of mountaineering was worth doing on this particular mountain. Within a generation, it would become one of the most respected traditions in the sport. For decades, expedition after expedition honored it. But Kangchenjunga was never only a mountain of traditions. It was still one of the most dangerous places on Earth, and it kept proving it. Wanda Rutkiewicz, May 12, 1992. By 1992, Wanda Rutkiewicz was one of the most accomplished mountaineers alive. She had been the first European woman to summit Everest in 1978, carrying iron injections to manage the anemia threatening to keep her unconscious at altitude. She had been the first woman to summit K2 in 1986 without supplemental oxygen. She had climbed 8 of the world's 14 8,000-meter peaks and was pursuing the remaining 6 in a project she called the Caravan of Dreams. Kangchenjunga would be her 9th. She joined a Mexican expedition led by Carlos Carsolio. On May 12, 1992, the two departed Camp 4 at 7,900 meters / 25,919 feet together at 3:30 a.m. Carsolio moved faster. He reached the summit at 5 p.m. alone and began descending. At approximately 8,250 meters / 27,067 feet, around 8 p.m., he encountered Rutkiewicz moving upward. She had almost no supplies, a 20-meter rope, a bivy sack, a headlamp, minimal food and water. She was 49 years old and climbing in the death zone at night, planning to bivouac and push for the summit the following morning. Carsolio urged her to descend with him. She refused. He was too exhausted from his own summit push to physically insist. He continued down. She continued up into the darkness. That was the last confirmed sighting of Wanda Rutkiewicz alive. When she failed to appear by May 16th, Carsolio left emergency supplies at Camp 2, food, fuel, water, a walkie-talkie, and oxygen, and descended. The radio stayed silent. In 1995, an Italian-Czech team found a woman's body at 7,700 meters / 25,262 feet on the southwest face. Later analysis of the clothing and other items suggested it was probably not Rutkiewicz, more likely Bulgarian climber Jordanka Dimitrova. Wanda Rutkiewicz has never been found. Whether she ever reached the summit, which would have made her the first woman to stand on the world's 3 highest mountains, has never been confirmed. The mountain kept that answer. The 2013 disaster, May 20th to 21st. On May 20th, 2013, 11 climbers reached the summit of Kangchenjunga. The problem was the time. Hungarian climbers Zsolt Eros and Peter Kiss summited at 6 p.m. local time, far too late to descend safely before darkness. They were forced to bivouac at 8,300 meters / 27,231 feet. They never made it back to Camp 4 the following day. Korean climber Park Nam-soo suffered a fatal fall near the summit. 2 Sherpas, Furba Sherpa and Bibak Sherpa, also died on the descent. 5 people dead in a single night. The deciding factor in every case was the same: summit times so late that descending in daylight became impossible. The mountain had not changed. The storms had not been unusual. The climbers had simply left the summit too late and paid the full price for it. Veteran Spanish alpinist Carlos Soria, 74 years old, turned around at 8,300 meters after calculating he had fallen too far behind schedule. He descended safely. That contrast is the sharpest lesson Kangchenjunga has ever given, the tradition that survived everything. Through every disaster, through every decade, one thing remained constant. The tradition held. The 1977 Indian Army team, led by Colonel Narinder Kumar, only the second ascent in history, left the summit untouched. Doug Scott, Peter Boardman, and Joe Tasker, in 1979, making the first ascent without supplemental oxygen, ended the climb just below the top. Expedition after expedition made the same choice in the same place. No regulation required it, no authority enforced it. For nearly 70 years, climbers have traditionally halted just Tasker of Kangchenjunga's highest point, preserving one of mountaineering's most remarkable acts of respect. In recent years, GPS measurements and changing snow conditions have sparked debate about whether every climber followed the tradition exactly. Some individual claims have complicated the picture, but the tradition is the story, not the final few feet of snow at the top. 70 years later, people still remember Joe Brown's climb, not because he reached the top, but because he chose not to. The caravan of dreams that Wanderroute Kiewicz began in 1992 ended somewhere above 8,250 meters on a mountain she refused to leave without a summit.